This case was hidden because it revealed a calculated deception rooted in obsession and desperation. But today, I will tell you how a woman staged her own kidnapping to frame her husband. An operation so carefully concealed it almost slipped through the cracks of the system.
For years, no one dared to speak of it. The official reports dismissed it as a bizarre domestic dispute gone wrong, but beneath the surface, a web of lies, greed, and silence unraveled. It started in Akron, Ohio, a quiet suburb where Danielle Ruiz's life seemed ordinary. Married to Michael Carter, a local mechanic with a clean record and a reputation for stability. But I remember the first clue, an anonymous tip sent through the FOIA system, referencing Operation Red Moon, a code name I'd never heard before. I pulled the case files on June 14, 2011, and what I saw made my stomach tighten. Danielle had claimed her husband kidnapped her during a late-night walk, leaving her stranded in a deserted cul-de-sac. She appeared frantic, terrified, perfectly rehearsed. But the evidence immediately raised questions. Witnesses nearby reported hearing no screams, no struggle, only a woman's muffled voice calling for help from a different location, miles away from where Danielle said she'd been taken. Would you have noticed this detail in the file? The inconsistencies weren't obvious at first glance, but I've learned to read between the lines. In her statement, Danielle insisted she'd been abducted by strangers, yet her alibi was shaky. Her phone records showed she'd been in contact with someone during the supposed kidnapping window. A shadow operation, perhaps, using her as a pawn?
The real breakthrough came when I examined her financials. Danielle had recently withdrawn a significant sum of cash, enough to fund an operation. I found shadow clinics registered under fake names, ghost accounts linked to untraceable crypto transactions. She was involved in more than just staged kidnapping. It was part of a larger scheme, extortion perhaps, or some underground network trading in disinformation and fear. But why? Who was truly behind it? And where was her husband? Initially, Michael Carter was the prime suspect, disappeared after her report, untraceable. But I had doubts. I ordered a deeper dive into their marriage, their background. What I uncovered was startling. Danielle had a history of small-time fraud, manipulation, even child neglect cases. Was she capable of orchestrating such a complex lie? I remember the moment I discovered her secret. It was a hidden camera footage, obtained through a shadowy source, showing her meeting with an unknown man, an intermediary. They discussed the plan, the details of the kidnapping, the money transfer. The face on the footage was blurred, but the voice was unmistakable. The woman I had seen in court, in her tearful testimony, was she really the victim, or a mastermind hiding behind a mask of innocence? Would you have believed the official version? It seemed so simple. A woman abducted, her husband a suspect. But every piece of evidence pointed elsewhere. I began to suspect a betrayal, someone close, complicit in the deception. Did her family know? Her friends? A network of silence kept her secrets buried, but I pushed deeper. The turning point came when I uncovered a pattern. Similar staged incidents, unregistered minors, shadow clinics operating under the radar. Danielle's role was more than just a victim. She was a conduit, a puppet in a larger game. Her husband's disappearance now looked less like an abduction and more like a controlled removal. I confronted her in a small motel outside Fresno, California, in late 2012. She cracked under pressure, revealing fragments of the truth, admitting the kidnapping was a setup, paid for by someone else. But her confession was incomplete, half-formed. Did she act alone, or was she a pawn in a larger, darker shadow network? This is where trust begins to fracture. I remember the internal pressure, official channels urging silence, threats from unknown sources warning me to back off. I was warned. Some things are better left undiscovered. But I couldn't stop. Not when I saw the bigger picture, the system's complicity, the cover-ups, the silent agreements. Eventually, the walls closed in. Evidence surfaced that Danielle's husband was never truly missing. He had been coerced, threatened, or perhaps had escaped the trap entirely. The real man was in a different state, living under a new identity, his own life shattered by a conspiracy he never knew he was part of. And Danielle? She vanished from the records, quietly placed in a witness protection program, her story buried beneath layers of official silence. But I wonder, did she truly escape? Or did she find new ways to manipulate the shadows? Would you believe this is still happening? That behind every domestic dispute or missing person report, there might be something more sinister? I've seen enough to know. These stories rarely end cleanly. They leave scars, doubts, and questions that never fully get answered.
If this case had been investigated today, I suspect the outcome would be different. With modern forensic technology, digital footprints, and relentless transparency, perhaps the truth would finally surface. But back then, it was easier to hide secrets behind official silence and bureaucratic walls. Now, I carry these memories like a warning. Every detail, every lie, every betrayal, part of a pattern I've seen too often. They try to silence us, to cover their tracks. But some stories refuse to stay buried. If you've listened this far, you're searching for the truth. Subscribe. I'll show you the next case. These files rarely survive to the end. Subscribe while this one is still here, because what looks most innocent on the surface often hides the darkest secrets. And this is only one episode. Subscribe so I can show you the next. Every day I'll post a real case from my archive, investigations I solved that still unsettle me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment. Your thoughts matter. It really helps this channel. Stay safe. See you tomorrow. The story doesn't end with her disappearance. Not entirely, because the deeper I dug, the more I realized that this case was just a fragment of something much larger. An intricate web of deceit spun by people who knew exactly how far they could push the system without being caught. Months after her supposed vanishing, I received an anonymous tip, a cryptic message hinting at Operation Red Moon, again, but this time with a different target. It pointed to a shadow operation involving high-level officials, people with access to the most confidential files, people who understood how to manipulate the system from the inside. I tracked the source, which led me to a small, nondescript office in Queens, New York. Inside, I found file after file, dossiers on families, cover-ups, manipulations of child custody cases, unregistered minors moved across states like commodities, all linked to a clandestine network that thrived off confusion, fear, and silence. Was Danielle just a pawn, or was she a master manipulator herself? The truth was, I couldn't tell anymore. Her story was just one piece of a puzzle that stretched across multiple states. Fresher tips indicated similar cases, all with suspicious disappearances, staged incidents, and fake identities. I remember the moment I saw the pattern. It was a series of dates, locations, and names, all connected through coded references I didn't fully understand at the time. But what struck me most was a recurring name, the Broker, an alias for someone believed to be orchestrating these operations from the shadows. Would you have suspected this level of corruption? I knew then that I was touching something far bigger than a domestic lie. It was a shadow system, an underground economy built on the lies of desperate people, protected by silence and fear. The deeper I went, the more I questioned the official narrative. Why had this case been buried so deeply? Why had Danielle's story been allowed to surface only briefly before vanishing? Someone wanted this to stay hidden. I suspect it was because revealing the full scope would have implicated powerful figures, those who profit from chaos, from confusion, from the exploitation of families at their most vulnerable. I was close to exposing the entire operation when I received an unmarked package. Inside was a USB drive containing encrypted recordings, conversations, meetings, plans. I played them back in the dim light of my office and my blood ran cold. The voices were unmistakable. Law enforcement officials, judges, even some local politicians, all discussing the next shipment, cleaning up the mess, and protecting the operation at all costs. Could it be true? Was it just paranoia? Or was I witnessing a conspiracy of silence so profound that it threatened to swallow everything I thought I knew? That's when I realized I was no longer just an investigator. I had become a threat to someone. I kept the evidence hidden, knowing that if it got out, I'd be targeted, discredited, or worse. But I couldn't stop questioning. How many more cases like Danielle's had been manipulated or concealed? How many families had been destroyed by people in the shadows, operating with impunity? And here's the truth I wrestle with. Did Danielle know her role? Was she a willing participant or coerced into this elaborate game? I suspect she was both, used as a pawn, but also complicit in her own way. Because the more I uncovered, the more I realized that trust in the system was a facade. Families like hers, like mine, are vulnerable to the unseen puppeteers pulling strings behind the curtain. If this had happened in your family, what would you have done? Would you have believed the official story, or would you have fought to find the truth, no matter how dangerous it became? I wonder if Danielle ever truly escaped her past, or if she's still out there, somewhere, playing her part in the shadows. Perhaps she's been replaced, or perhaps she's still watching, waiting for her next move, a ghost in the system, haunting the files we keep locked away. This case is a reminder. Every file,
every testimony, every victim may hide secrets too dangerous to reveal. And the system? It's not always on our side. Sometimes it's protecting those who manipulate it. If you've listened this far, you're already searching for the truth. Subscribe. I'll show you more hidden stories from the files that almost never see the light of day. These secrets rarely survive exposure. Subscribe while you can. And this is only one chapter. Subscribe so I can reveal the next. More shadows, more lies, more truths that the system tried to hide. Every day, I post a new case. Investigations I've kept locked away. Truths I've uncovered that still haunt me. Subscribe so you won't miss the next one. And leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Sometimes, these stories are more connected than you realize, and your voice might help expose what's truly hidden. Stay vigilant. I'll be back tomorrow. The more I delved into the labyrinth, the clearer it became that Danielle was just a piece in a much larger game, one played by people who understood the power of secrecy and control. I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about the case, about justice, about the very fabric of the system itself. Months after I uncovered the recordings, I received a second package, this time carefully disguised. Inside was a series of photographs taken covertly, showing Danielle in different locations, sometimes in a suburban house, sometimes in a hotel room. Always alone, always watchful. I wondered, was she still involved? Or had she been forced into silence? Could she be both? One photo caught my eye, an image of her sitting at a small kitchen table, a cup of coffee untouched in front of her. The background revealed a glimpse of a family photo, smiling faces, a man, children, but the faces had been blurred. Why? Was this an attempt to hide her true identity, or a warning? And then I remembered the whispers from my anonymous source, hinting that Danielle's husband, Michael Carter, was alive and well, hidden somewhere, possibly under a false identity. If true, this explained why she'd been so desperate to pin the kidnapping on him. She needed to divert suspicion, perhaps to protect someone else. Could it be that Michael had been coerced or threatened into submission? Or perhaps he had become a victim himself, caught in a web spun by those who profit from chaos? I kept asking myself, how much of the official story was lies? And how deeply had the system been compromised? The more I investigated, the more I realized that the network involved in these staged incidents was extensive. Shadow clinics, unregistered minors moved across states like commodities, fake IDs, and secret meetings in nondescript locations. It was a covert operation, and Danielle was a key player. Whether willing or manipulated, I couldn't tell. Would you have suspected this level of corruption? I kept coming back to one question. Who benefits? Who gains from the chaos, from families torn apart, from fear exploited? The answer was chilling. Power, money, control. People in high places, shielded by layers of silence and complicity. I remember interviewing a former employee of one of the shadow clinics. His story was disturbing. A network that supplied fake documents, arranged staged kidnappings, and even manipulated forensic evidence. He told me that some of the rescues were just cleanup operations, clearing the way for new victims to be processed. I questioned myself. How many families had been caught in this web? How many disappearances were orchestrated, not by chance, but by design? And the most disturbing part, many of these cases were never officially connected. They were hidden behind the guise of routine investigations, swept under the rug by officials who knew too much. I had to ask, did Danielle orchestrate this entire scheme? Or was she a victim, manipulated into believing she was doing the right thing? The evidence pointed to both possibilities. Her involvement was undeniable, but her motives were murky. Was she seeking revenge, or was she coerced into playing her part? In the end, I found a document. An internal memo from a now-defunct agency branch discussing Operation Red Moon in coded language. It referenced disrupting the narrative, protecting the interests, and controlling the fallout. It was clear that this operation was more than just a criminal enterprise. It was a state-level cover-up to maintain a fragile balance of power. If this had happened in your family, what would you have believed? Would you have trusted the official story, or would you have kept digging like I did? Because I learned that sometimes the truth is hidden in plain sight, behind layers of deception and fear. And I wonder, what's the real story behind Danielle's disappearance? Did she escape, or was she silenced? Does she still watch from the shadows, a ghost haunting the edges of the system? Or has she been replaced, another pawn in a game too dangerous to stop? This case isn't just about one woman or one man. It's about the unseen forces that manipulate lives, destroy families, and hide behind the veneer of authority. It's about how easily trust can be broken when those in power decide to cover their tracks. Would you have noticed the clues if they had been right in front of you? Would you have believed the official story? Or would you have looked deeper, like I did? If you've listened this far, you're already searching for the truth. Subscribe. I'll show you more hidden stories from the files that almost never see the light of day. These secrets rarely survive exposure. Subscribe while you can. And this is only one chapter. Subscribe so I can reveal the next. More shadows, more lies, more truths that the system tried to hide. Every day I post a new case. Investigations I've kept locked away. Truths I've uncovered that still haunt me. Subscribe so you won't miss the next one. And leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Sometimes, these stories are more connected than you realize, and your voice might help expose what's truly hidden. Stay vigilant. I'll be back tomorrow. The story I thought I knew was just the surface. Beneath it, an entirely different picture emerged. One woven with layers of lies, betrayals, and unthinkable manipulation. As I sifted through the evidence, I began to see that Danielle's staged kidnapping was not an isolated incident. It was part of a broader pattern, an intricate operation spanning multiple states, orchestrated by people who understood how to exploit the system's weaknesses. Months after I first uncovered her shadowy connections, I received a new lead, an encrypted file linked to a shell company registered in Fresno, California. Within it, I found a network of fake clinics, shell accounts, and coded transactions. It was clear that someone was funneling money, and that Danielle was merely a node, an asset used to distract, obfuscate, and manipulate. The key question: who was really behind this operation? I traced the financial trails, and what I found was staggering. Hidden behind layers of shell corporations, I discovered a clandestine syndicate that dealt in the chaos of families, moving minors, staging disappearances, laundering money through crypto exchanges that couldn't be traced. It was an underground economy built on exploitation and fear. Would you have suspected this was happening? Because I didn't. Not at first. I thought I was chasing a domestic case, a woman's desperation. But the truth was much darker. I realized Danielle's kidnapping was a distraction, an elaborate smokescreen designed to cover something far more sinister. And then I found the real kicker, a series of recordings from an anonymous source showing meetings in nondescript locations, hotel lobbies, back rooms in strip malls, even a vacant warehouse outside Akron. The voices were hushed, but unmistakable, discussing shipment schedules, safe houses, disclosure, and the next target. It was a covert operation, moving people and secrets across the country like commodities. Would you believe that? That such a vast, organized effort could operate in plain sight, protected by layers of plausible deniability? I wondered how many families had been sacrificed, how many children had been moved, all under the guise of rescue or family reunification that was really just a cover for exploitation. I kept asking myself, was Danielle part of this from the beginning? Or did she become entangled later? The evidence suggested both. She had the skills, she knew how to manipulate, how to stage a scene, and yet, the recordings hinted she was being controlled, directed by someone else. Was she a victim or a willing accomplice? I remember confronting her during an undercover operation, trying to get answers, hoping she'd crack under pressure. But she was cold, calculated, almost detached. She admitted she'd been part of the plan, but insisted she was only following orders, that she had no choice, that someone else was pulling the strings. If this had happened in your family, what would you have done? Would you have believed her, or would you have suspected something far worse? Because I've come to realize that trust in the system is fragile. It's built on a foundation of silence, fear, and complicity. And once that foundation is cracked, everything else collapses. The deeper I went, the more I suspected that high-ranking officials knew more than they let on. I uncovered hints of cover-ups, internal memos warning to contain the fallout, directives to manage the narrative, and instructions to keep the public in the dark. It was a system designed to protect its own at all costs, even if that meant sacrificing innocent lives or destroying families. One document I found, a confidential internal report, detailed protocols for handling sensitive cases that could threaten national stability. It referenced discreet removals, covert relocations, and acceptable losses. I saw the words and realized how deep this conspiracy went. beyond just local criminals, into the very heart of institutions.
And what about Michael Carter, the man I believed was missing? I tracked his records. An alias, a false identity, a life hidden in plain sight. It seemed he had been moved, perhaps to protect him from being a liability. Or perhaps he had become a pawn himself, coerced into silence or forced into exile. Forced.
I kept asking myself, if I had been able to find all this, why hadn't the system? Why had so many of these cases been quietly buried? Because the truth is, some secrets are too dangerous to reveal. They threaten the delicate balance maintained by those in power. If this story were played out today, I believe the technology and transparency would make it harder to hide. But back then, the system was a fortress. Walls built on silence, fear, and complicity. I wonder how many others are still out there, waiting to be uncovered, their stories buried beneath layers of lies. And Danielle, did she ever get free? Or did she become just another ghost, slipping through the cracks of the system? Maybe she's still watching, still waiting for her chance to speak, if she ever can. Or maybe she's been silenced, just like so many others. This isn't just about one woman's deception. It's about the system's dark secret. A network so deeply entrenched that it can manipulate families, destroy lives, and operate with near impunity. It's a reminder that trust is fragile and that the truth is often hidden behind a mask of legitimacy. Would you have believed the official story? Or would you have looked deeper, like I did? Because I've learned that if you want to find the truth, you have to be willing to go into the shadows, where the real stories hide. If you've listened this far, you're already searching for the truth. Subscribe. I'll show you more hidden stories from the files that almost never see the light of day. These secrets rarely survive exposure. Subscribe while you can. And this is only one chapter. Subscribe so I can reveal the next. More shadows, more lies, more truths that the system tried to hide. Every day I post a new case, investigations I've kept locked away, truths I've uncovered that still haunt me. Subscribe so you won't miss the next one. And leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Sometimes these stories are more connected than you realize, and your voice might help expose what's truly hidden. Stay vigilant. I'll be back tomorrow.